Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Welcome to another vibrant, exciting, and informative session of Let's Talk TCI Real Estate, a show where we can talk about all things real estate in the Turks and Caicos Islands. Also, a show where I am so blessed to be able to have a professional to join me where we can get the facts firsthand. We all know that each island in the Turks and Caicos is unique in its own way. And I always find it a joy when I can highlight the strengths of the island. And also, I get really excited when I can hear and learn more about new initiatives and improvements that are coming for the islands that will make our lives as people of the island even better. So, the segment today, of course, it's about a spotlight on South Caicos. South Caicos is an island for me that I don't hear as much about. So again, I am so looking forward to the conversation today as me and my guests, we highlight South Caicos in its best light. So I was actually very excited when the Honorable Reverend John Malcolm accepted the invitation to be a guest on this segment, because I know that as a member of parliament and also as the deputy speaker of the House of Assembly, that he is extremely busy. But guess what? He found time to accommodate me in his hectic schedule, which I'm so grateful for. So Honorable Malcolm, he actually holds South Caicos a special place in his heart. And therefore, I know that he is the best person to have this conversation with today. With that all said, I will say to you, if you have comments or questions, please feel free to share it with us today. Be a part of this show. Get as much information from this segment as possible. And I will say, welcome to Let's Talk TCI Real Estate, Honorable John Malcolm. It's a pleasure to have you here today.
Thank you, Ms. Delancey, for the invitation. And I want to express my gratitude for being able to facilitate this meeting with you. I trust that the time that we spend together will be enjoyable and informative. Good afternoon to your viewers also and your listeners on social media platforms.
Thank you so much. So again, I always like to start every segment by having the guests introduce themselves, because I know that they can introduce themselves better than I can. So let's start by asking, who is Honorable Reverend John Malcolm?
Well, I don't know about all those titles, but John Malcolm was born in South Caicos. I grew up here, and my early years was spent in South Caicos, going fishing, going in the bush to catch donkeys and cows and horses, going fishing every day. So that was my early life. But I migrated to the Bahamas at an early age, where I went to school there and dropped out of school at 14, thinking I could take on the world. And eventually I evolved into doing private studies and qualified for seminary. I went to seminary in 1995, graduated in 1999 with a bachelor's degree in theology and a diploma in church administration. And since then, since 1999 up to 2016, I pastored the Mount Olivet Baptist Church in South Caicos. And then I got the fever for politics. And the Baptist Union felt that politics and religion couldn't marry each other. So I was asked to resign as a pastor. I still function in my church. I still preach, but I'm just not pastoring that church anymore.
Great. So basically what you're saying, from what I'm hearing, you are a well-rounded person. And you know what? Sometimes life takes you in a different direction, but I'm sure that you are happy in the place that you are now, where you can represent the island of South Caicos in its full capacity.
My vision is that, and I believe God has ordained this for me, because I see politics and my representation of South Caicos as an extension of my ministry. Because ministry is really ministering to people, helping taking care of the needs of people. And so I see this as an extension of my Christian ministry.
That's a very good way to actually put it. Mm-hmm. And in talking about ministry and talking about people, as we are talking about the island of South Caicos today, every island itself, I always like to say, have like a backbone. Persons that you think about when you think about that island. Say, for example, when I think about North Caicos, I think about the Mizzix or the Gardner family. So if I think about Providence House, I might think about the Delancey family. I'm thinking about this as you're thinking about people. Who would you say probably are the backbone of the island of South Caicos? Who are those family names that you think about? And what type of contribution you think that these families have made to the where South Caicos is today?
That's a very good question because South Caicos, the salt industry was king since the early 1700s up until 1960 when the industry died. In 1957 to 1958, a couple came from the US and started a fish processing plant. So that started the fishing industry after the death of the salt industry. Now, in the early, like I said, in the late 1950s, this industry got started. And men in South Caicos were used to subsistence farming, small scale fishing. And now that the industry was taking on a commercial flavor, the men really couldn't meet the demands of the new industry. And so the plant owners had to bring in Jamaican fishermen from Jamaica to teach the fishermen here how to build traps and how to fish it on a commercial scale. And some of those names are like Mr. McCoy, the Chisholms, the Craigs, the Fifes, the Topies, the Cooks. If you know Trevor Cook, his father was one of those men who came from Jamaica to teach our fishermen how to do commercial fishing. Local fishermen, as I said, were engaged in small scale fishing, but gradually caught on how to make traps and get bigger boats and launch out into, the deep as far as getting the industry started. Some of the local men who I think excelled in that area were the Cox brothers, who came from Providence, Blue Hills, we used to call it in those days. Louis Cox was the eldest of the three brothers, Edward Cox and Reuben Cox. These men were very, very good divers, great divers, and they made a great contribution to the initial start of the fishing industry. Eventually, they end up owning their own bigger boats and really, really got established as a part of the industry, an integral part of the industry. Mr. Louis Cox himself, well, the other brothers have died, but Mr. Louis Cox himself eventually became a premier businessman in South Caicos, having a number of businesses where he started as a diver, as a fisherman. And he now has a marina, he now has a major supermarket. He owns two of the seafood processing plants on South Caicos. He owns two of the gas stations. So this family, and this man in particular, made a significant contribution to the fishing industry. Now, also Mr. Norman Saunders, who owns a fishing plant, he has a processing plant that he has owned for the last maybe 35, 40 years. So he made a significant, and is still managing that property, a significant contribution to the fishing industry. Okay.
Yeah, those names you call, like Mr. Louis Cox, those are familiar names to me, and Mr. Norman Sanders, those are familiar names to me, and I think it's familiar names to a lot of people. Even if you don't know much about South Caicos, you've heard those names over and over.
Names. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. But let me follow up, because not only fishing took off at that time, but development actually took off on a very small scale at that time. A surveyor by the name of Liam McGuire, I think he was brought here by Mr. Brian Reed, who owned properties on South Caicos and had a company called Caicos Company. And McGuire did a lot of surveying of the lands, and McGuire was able to get local people to sell their plots of land, sometimes 40, 50 acres of land, for £1.10 per acre, sometimes an old truck for an acre or two of land. Okay, and so people gladly do that because they thought the land was useless.
Right.
And so McGuire bought this land for the Caicos Company. The Caicos Company sat on that land for over 40 years, eventually selling it to a company from Chicago, a real estate company called CMK.
Correct.
They are the owners, the parent company of Sail Rock.
Sail Rock. Okay.
Now, those lots that were sold for £1.10 an acre are now being sold for hundreds of thousands of dollars per acre. Okay. So, but McGuire also started the Admiral's Arms Hotel, which is the first hotel in the Turks and Caicos Islands. And back in the late 60s, early 70s, they were bringing in scuba divers, sometimes 50, 60, 70, 80 scuba divers every week. And
Right.
so South Caicos was leading in the development of tourism in the Turks and Caicos Islands.
That's an interesting fact. The first hotel was actually in South Caicos. I didn't
That's right.
know
That's
that.
right. The Admiral's Arms, it was called.
Emerald Island. Okay.
Mhm.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's a lot of good information, and I am familiar with Sail Rock Resort now, but to see how
Right.
far it has come from, and when you talked about, trading and buying property, like you say, even for an old truck, it sounds funny hearing it, but it shows you how far we've come from to where we are
Right.
now in terms
Right.
of everything, on these islands.
Right. Let me just add just one more person I'd like to add, and I have to. It's my father.
That's what I was going to ask you about. I was waiting to hear about him because I
Right.
know he's contributed significantly.
Right.
Go ahead.
He had about 52 acres of land. Much of it was beachfront property. And in order to get something going in South Caicos as far as development is concerned, he sold land cheaply to developers. As a matter of fact, his first deal was for 22 acres of land that he sold beach property at $3,000 an acre. And those developers sat on that property for over 50 years, and they just sold it recently, I believe, for some $300,000 an acre, the beach side.
Right.
Okay. But he also, the property on which the East Bay Hotel is situated, he also sold that to the developers at $21,000 an acre just to get something going in South Caicos. Okay. So he made a contribution also to the development, the tourist development of South Caicos.
You know what? When you say, he sold it just to get development started, sometimes people look at saying, well, why did you sell your land? I'm not encouraging people to sell their land. No, that's not what it's about. But just to hear how some of these people who actually made a sacrifice for the rest of us by giving up some of their valuable possessions, such as land, in order to for development to move forward in these countries.
Right. Yeah, he did that.
And also just on a political note, he was contributed to the Constitution of the Turks and Caicos Islands. If you want to tell us a little bit about that.
He did. He in 1976, I believe, he wrote a constitution that is lauded as being the best we ever had. Well, he had a team. He worked with Errol Mizik, Charlene Cartwright, Carlos Simons, Norman Saunders Jr. These were the lawyers who worked with him. But he was the chairman of the Constitutional Commission. And so he coordinated all their ideas and wrote the Constitution. And as I said, that is lauded and recognized as one of the best we had for a long time. He also wrote a second Constitution. I think it was in 2014. Not only that, because of his work in community and in politics, when the Constitution was suspended in 1985, in 1986, he and the then leader of the Progressive National Party, Samuel Francis, they went to the United Nations to make a case for the restoration of the Constitution of the Turks and Caicos Islands. And Bartos, being the leader, pushed him ahead to be the spokesman. And he spoke on in a plenary session on the floor of the United Nations, the General Assembly, which is something really, really not ordinary. It doesn't happen ordinarily. And I believe it is believed that he impressed upon the United Nations so much that within a few days, a few weeks, the Constitution was restored back to the Turks and Caicos Islands. As a result of that, the United Nations invited him to become an expert on decolonization. And so up until the time of his death, he was recognized as an expert, a United Nations expert on decolonization. So he made a significant contribution, politically, economically, and otherwise.
He played his part in society.
He played his part. Yes, he did.
I remember on his passing, because he was a dear friend of my dad as well. I said that the Turks and Caicos Islands have lost a great giant, because he did make a real impactful contribution to the island that we all will never forget.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
Thank you for that.
Great. So we've been talking about these people who have contributed, and seems as if you know a lot of people. So I'm going to ask this question. I'm not judging based on age or anything, but how was South Caicos as a child to you compared to what it is now? What can you tell me some of the differences so we can see where we've come from as as an island of South Caicos?
When I was growing up in South Caicos, this island was a closely knitted community. Uh, there seemed to have been no differences between the haves and the have-nots and all of this. We were so closely knitted that on holidays such as Easter Monday, whole families would go to the beach. The whole town would go to the beach, and every family would be cooking, have a little pot here, a little pot there, and we were so closely knitted that you could eat from anybody's pot on the beach that day. That's how closely we were knitted together as a community. I remember we had regular droughts then when it didn't rain for months. And I remember occasions when 4 or 5 families would get together because not everybody had a mule car. We didn't have cars those days or trucks.
Right.
Not everybody had a mule or a donkey. So families would get together, and maybe 2 or 3 mule carts and 4 or 5 families would get together, load up their clothes, and go out into the wilderness to find the wells to wash their clothes, spend the day out there, cooking and feeding the children and having a wonderful time together as a community, washing clothes. So those are the kind of things that I remember as being closely knitted to me and other families in South Caicos. Now that all of that has changed. And I think the reason for the change has been what I call the superimposition of other cultures on our culture. Because I remember growing up, Sunday was a sacred day.
Exactly.
If you didn't go to church, you stayed at home. You didn't feel good being seen on the streets. Nowadays, people go to the beach on Sundays and have a party on Sundays. Good Friday was a sacred day. I mean, if you didn't go to church, you didn't venture out of your home on Good Friday until maybe after 3 o'clock.
Right.
You could visualize Jesus on the cross and that kind of thing. And so that's how religious we were. But all of that has changed because we have these different cultures now being imposed upon us. And Good Friday is no longer a sacred day. They party on Good Friday. They drink on Good Friday. They drink on Sunday. And so all of that has changed. And the community is not what it used to be anymore.
Would you say this is specific to South Caicos, or is this specific to the Turks and Caicos in general?
I think it's all across the Turks and Caicos Islands, and you can attest to that.
Yeah.
You live in Providence Islands, right?
I agree with you,
You live in the metropolis. So on Sunday is sports day and party day, and you know that. So it has happened all across the Turks and Caicos Islands. Our whole culture has been undermined by other cultures being imposed upon us.
Yeah, I mean, I think so as well. And I think that's something sad, and we need to really get back to,
We're losing ourselves.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We are losing ourselves.
Yeah, yes.
So what would you
cognizant of that? Go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
No, you go ahead. I was just saying we need to be cognizant of that fact.
Yes, we do.
To actively do something about it.
Correct.
And it needs to begin in our schools with the kindergartners, early kindergarten, begin to inculcate into them, our culture and who we are as a people.
I totally agree with that. Yeah. So what would you say is the difference between what separates South Caicos from any of the other islands in the Turks and Caicos chain? We're all unique, but what will speak to us to say this is South Caicos compared to another island in the chain?
South Caicos is recognized as the fishing capital in the Turks and Caicos Islands. And I like to think the fishing capital in the Caribbean, in the region, because South Caicos produces the best seafood you can find anywhere. As a matter of fact, before tourism took off in Providence Islands and all this other stuff took off, development, South Caicos was recognized as the breadbasket of the Turks and Caicos Islands. I remember men coming from Grand Turk to work in South Caicos, Salt Key, Middle, North, Blue Hills, we used to call it then, which was Providence Islands, men coming here to work, and many of them started their homes from their earnings here, started businesses, sent their children to college because of the monies they made in South Caicos. So South Caicos is unique in that we have been the breadbasket, and now we're still the fishing capital of the Turks and Caicos Islands. And we are a friendly people. We're the friendliest people in the world.
South Caicos, South Caicos people more friendlier than Provo people?
Yes. Yes, South Caicos people are the friendliest people in the trucks and Caicos out. Now, I'll tell you something. Don't rumple them.
Okay.
If you rumple them, you got trouble on your head. But we're very friendly people and accommodating. Sometimes I think we're too accommodating to strangers and others who come to live among us.
Yeah, you are correct. South Caicos people are very, very friendly people. Definitely, they are.
Yeah. Glad you agree.
So let me ask you this question then. All right. So we've talked about, who you are. We've talked about where South Caicos has come from. We've talked about the people who actually are the backbone of South Caicos. Now, I just want to get a little political here by asking you, the other day in the budget, I looked at you and you were so passionate as you spoke about what is coming for South Caicos. I could see that it wasn't just someone speaking, just to have something to say, but more you were speaking from the heart because you were so proud of what it is that you are trying to do, or the government obviously was trying to do for the island of South Caicos, because I believe everyone realized that South Caicos need a lift. And you were so passionate about it, you were saying. So I would ask you, what are some of the infrastructural initiatives that your government has on the table for South Caicos that is in progress now, and what's in for the near future? And how do you see these initiatives changing the economic outlook of the island?
Thank you. Very good question. I'm glad you asked. Back in 2016, the Rufus Ewing administration set aside $27 million of injection into the redevelopment of the South Caicos Airport. $17 million was spent resurfacing the runway, so we have a brand new runway. Another $10,000 was earmarked for building of a new terminal building. Of course, government changed hands in 2016, and that project fell by the wayside for a while. The monies were still there in the Airports Authority, and our government is now completing that terminal building. It is just about completed. Just a few minor works to be done, like cosmetics, groundwork, the parking lot, things that needs to be completed before. We had a soft opening for Regatta, so people were able to come through, but we'll have the official opening later sometime in the year when all of these minor works are completed. But no, I was excited in my budget debate, my budget contribution, because 2 weeks before that, I attended a stakeholders meeting I was called to be a part of in Providenciales. And at this meeting was the Airports Authority, the owners of the East Bay Hotel, the owners of the Sail Rock Hotel, and other ministers, the Minister of Immigration, the Minister of Finance, and other important people, stakeholders, as I said. And the focus was really on South Caicos, this meeting, this whole entire meeting. And the reason for that was because East Bay is being rebranded by the Marriott chain of hotels. And they see that as very significant. And they see that as being something that is going to bring large amounts of people into the island of South Caicos. And everybody there agreed that this is what's going to happen. And so everybody spoke positively about the coming development of South Caicos. And so the Airports Authority now going to bring a new fire truck, increase their staff. The Ministry of Immigration going to bring in more immigration officers, more customs officers, more security officers. So jobs are going to be coming on stream. Also, because of this, the basic other basic infrastructure that is ongoing is the redevelopment of the South Caicos port. That is just about finished. I think they're just about to pave that now. So all of these infrastructural developments are in place for what I see as great development that is coming to South Caicos. That's why I was so excited, because for a long time, nothing has been happening in South Caicos. Nothing has been happening here. And now that I'm seeing the positive vibes coming from so many stakeholders, I'm excited. And I said in the house, I'm more than excited. I am ecstatic.
Yeah. You touched on the airport. I think that's been a big thing, a big question for a while when it came to South Caicos, as to
Right.
what time the airport will be completed. Because a lot of people are saying that this is gonna be a big revolution for South Caicos,
Oh,
when
yeah.
you can have international and domestic flights to come into South Caicos. Do
Right.
you, yeah. Do you see where international flights will be able to come in as well in the future? I mean, the near closer future.
That was a part of the discussion at the stakeholders meeting. The fact that because of this increase in numbers of visitors coming to South Caicos, that there's a need to bring direct flights into South Caicos. As a matter of fact, the Minister for Tourism, in her address in the budget debate, said that she's in negotiations with an airline to bring direct services into American Airlines, she said, to bring direct international service into South Caicos, if only 3 times per week. And as the demand grows, more flights would be brought on stream to accommodate the demand. So yes, that is under consideration. The discussions are advanced as far as that is concerned. As a matter of fact, that is why the hotels were so adamant that something be put in place sooner rather than later, because there was a window of opportunity for them to make their case, so that when the winter season or the season starts next year, everything will be in place to accommodate the increased numbers coming into South Caicos.
Right. I'll say one more thing about the airport and then the international flights. Just being in real estate, and a lot of times you speak with people, they all always focus on Providencial only because that's where the international flight comes in. And so when they have to take a secondary flight over to South Caicos, that causes them not to go and venture these islands, even though they are interested in doing so. So I believe that having those direct international flight, it's gonna really open up a big opportunity for South
Really?
Caicos like never before.
Of course. And like, as I said, everyone at that stakeholders meeting felt that way about this initiative, that South Caicos was really going to take off with what is happening, the basic infrastructures that are in, the proposed developments that are coming. And so everybody felt positive about that. Now, also in that budget debate, I addressed initiatives that are coming on stream for South Caicos. The government has earmarked $1.5 million for the redevelopment of the Regatta Village. $500,000 is in this year's budget to get it going, to erect a new facility, parking lots, roads, all of that, all the surrounding, all of the amenities around the Regatta Village, $1.5 million. That is going to go out to tender in a couple of months. That is definitely going to go out to tender. So hopefully by the end of the year, we should see construction started on that facility. Secondly,
before you move on, let's take a pin here. For those who don't understand the significance of the Regatta Village, because you're talking about this improvement, could you explain to them, like, what is the Regatta Village and why is this important to the people of South Caicos?
Okay, when the Queen Elizabeth II visited the Turks and Caicos Islands in 1966, a regatta was held to entertain her. We had boat races, we had donkey races, we had plaiting of the maypole. All of these activities formed a part of the tradition over the years. But in 2017, rather, the village, like much of the island of South Caicos, was damaged and destroyed by Hurricane Irma and Maria. And it's been a long time getting the resources, the monies in place to redevelop that area. Fortunately, this year's budget has earmarked, as I said, $1.5 million for the redevelopment of that. Now, Regatta started from, like I said, 1966. And we've been having a regatta almost every year, except for the time that we weren't able to do so after the devastation of the hurricanes. And so this year, we just celebrated Regatta last weekend. It was the 56th annual Regatta celebration. And Regatta is the oldest festival in the Turks and Caicos Island. And so the village is a cultural center where people have concerts and meetings and workshops. So it is a vital part of the community. And so we are the poorer because of not having it. So the government is adamant that this facility is going to be restored, and they're going to pump the resources in there to make it a viable entity in our community once again.
Great. Yeah. So I had cut you off because you were talking about the initiatives and you spoke about the monies that are being put into the Regatta Village. But so you can continue to tell me what else infrastructure that you're thinking about what the government is putting in place.
Okay, if you know South Caicos, and
Hmm.
those of your viewers or listeners who know South Caicos will know that Campground Bay is
Hmm.
the economic hub of South Caicos. We have fishing plants there, we have a refueling marina, we have supermarkets there on Campground Bay. But over the years, Campground Bay has de-escalated into a deplorable state, the surrounding waters, because what has been happening over the years is that much of the fish that is sold in restaurants and hotels around the Turks and Caicos Island comes from South Caicos. And this fish is
Hmm.
processed right on Campground Bay. And much of the waste is thrown back into the water, which has contaminated the waters to a degree. And
Hmm.
so there's a need for dredging. There's a need for building a fish house with proper waste disposal, proper running water, proper ice making machines. There's a need to have a welcome center for those persons coming on the ferry from time to time. And so our government is now injecting, again, $1.5 million into doing all of that. $1 million is going to be spent this year. And going forward, we'll reassess the project going forward to see what other injections are needed to bring it to completion. And so that's also a vital initiative for South Caicos.
I agree that it is. I didn't know. I know South Caicos basically, like I've been there several times, but I didn't realize that's what the area was called. But just by you
Mhm.
describing it, I do understand the state that you're talking about. And if
Right.
this type of improvement is coming from in the area, I think that's a very fantastic idea in
Oh yeah.
terms
Oh
of
yes.
uplifting that area. It's a
Right.
it's a
Right.
it's an entry point that needs
It
to
is.
be taken care of.
And be welcoming to people, people
Hmm.
who come there. I I've had some bad experiences over here. I remember a couple of times coming to South Caicos on the ferry. A
Hmm.
few miles out, I heard people commenting, "Man, you smell that?" Because of that environment, the water and the smelling. And so, like I said, this is much needed.
Hmm.
It's long overdue, and we are now putting the money in place to make it happen.
Well, that's excellent. That's excellent. If that's what's happening, that's really good. So
Mhm.
let me ask you, but all these initiatives that are being put in place and that is being put forward for South Caicos, um, that means that there is, I feel like, a lot more room for investment into the island. So what kind of investment would you say that you would like to see for South Caicos moving forward?
Now, first and foremost, we don't want to become saturated with investment like Providenciales. Providenciales is overly saturated with development, so
Hmm.
much so that it is very difficult for the indigenous people to ever catch up with it.
Right.
The development of Providenciales, the wealth of Providenciales is concentrated in the hands of expatriate people.
Hmm.
I don't want to see that happen in South Caicos. I would like to see our development paced,
Right.
not rushed into it, but gradually building up things. And I would like to see our indigenous local Turks and Caicos Islands people capitalizing on that, doing small investments like a small 25-room hotel, a bone fishing lodge, a diving entity, scuba dive, small
Hmm.
business with indigenous people at the forefront is what I would like to see. Of course, we could use like a 200-room hotel to make sure that people are coming, but I wouldn't like to see any large-scale developments like that are happening on Providenciales here on South Caicos. I'd like to see it paced and more indigenous people, more local people being a part of it.
Yeah, I think for the length of time that South Caicos is waiting to get its real big boom, like you said, it will be better if it is paced out so that the residents aren't left behind
And
when all
benefit
of
from
this
it.
investment comes.
Yes, yes. That's what I'd like to see.
So for local residents of the island, sometimes when we're doing real estate, we're trying to encourage, I mean, islanders to invest within the island. It sometimes is difficult to find. Um, well, let me ask you, would you say? I guess you would say yes, but South Caicos is a good investment location for even local people on island at this particular stage.
Yes, it is. And I would encourage people, even people from South Caicos who are living in Providenciales to look at the opportunities that are emerging here as a result of what is happening and try to capitalize on it, because if they don't, other people, other nationalities are going to come in and capitalize on that. We're going to be locked out. One of the fears that I have is that our people in South Caicos, young men in particular, are not preparing to capitalize on what is coming. And so I fear that even South Caicos people living in Providenciales will come and capitalize on the opportunities, and our local people here won't get an opportunity to do so. So that's my fear of what's happening. It's coming, it's coming. We just need to prepare for it.
Right. I think, and when we started talking earlier, you were talking about how much property was sold for, back then in the time of, say, when your father helped with the East Bay Resort compared to what that same beachfront is selling for now. And that's a prime example of, like you said, trying to invest in something on the island of South Caicos now before those properties continue to escalate in price. And something I've always told, residents, especially the island you're from, try to invest in that island and buy something now. Even if you have property that's generational property, don't solely depend on that, because sometimes generation property takes so long to get subdivided and share out among family members. If you can invest in something that's your own at this time, I think it is a really good idea.
It really is good. Yes, I think so. And I think more people need to take that advice and begin doing that. Since the death of my father earlier this year, and we buried him in January, my siblings are now getting together to probate his estate. And we're looking at that possibility of joint ventures in utilizing some of the property to do something like that. Yeah.
Great. I just want to backpedal a little bit. I remember in your budget debate, not trying to emphasize so much on it, but one very good important point I heard you talk about was city water. When I heard that point about investors, with the idea of, now I don't know how far it's going to go, but the idea of bringing city water to South Caicos, what's your take on it? Because I feel like that's a great start for the island as well.
It is. And interestingly enough, this initiative got started when a couple who own a home on Sail Rock, invited me to their home and said they would like to make this as a gift to the community. They want to provide city water to the community as a gift. They love the island. They've been around. They see people moving around with water, carrying water on their heads, carrying water in a truck or something like that. And they would like to improve that situation for the community of South Caicos. Now, I took the idea to the government, but everything moves slow. Bureaucracy moves very slow in government. And it's been a while now since I've gotten any traction on that from say, the minister responsible. But there's a renewed interest in it now. I introduced the idea to the premier and other ministers, and they're now saying we need to move forward with this. So those homeowners are going to be in the Turks and Caicos Islands in July, and I'm arranging a meeting with the ministers responsible and the premier, so that they could impress upon them how much they want to do this for the community of South Caicos. And so I'm looking forward to that meeting, and I'm looking forward to this becoming a reality. Okay, yeah. I believe that this would be a great initiative for the community of South Caicos, where everybody can have water piped right to their homes. So I'm looking forward to that happening, and I'm confident it's going to happen. I'm confident. Right. Just once we get through the red tape, because to be honest with you, for someone making a gift to government, the red tape is so great. I mean, it's like you're pulling a tooth, pulling teeth. So it's just been difficult getting through that red tape to get this project going, but it's going to happen. I know it's going to happen.
Well, yeah, you know what? Just the fact that someone has brought the initiative up and is prepared to try and go through the challenge, I think it's still a good incentive and a good thing for the island to, get involved with it, because I think that's going to do a lot of difference for the people on the island, just having city water.
It's not like we have to go and convince these people to help us. They offered to help. So we're halfway there just because they offered that. We just need to get through the red tape and make it happen.
Yeah. So this show is normally just for 45 minutes, and believe it or not, we're at 45 minutes. But before we wrap it up, before we wrap it up, we talked about a number of things, and just so you know, I had the Honorable Jamal Robinson on my show previously as well, and he was also excited about South Caicos, talking about some of the great things that is coming for South Caicos. And he also had mentioned about the Marriott hotel coming on stream, which he think is going to be a good revolution for the island. But is there anything that we did
Right.
not talk about that you feel like it's detrimental to us to say to the people about what's happening in South Caicos, and just to shed some light on the island of South Caicos?
Okay. Back in the 1980s, South Caicos was a refueling point for planes being ferried between uh, Central America, South America, and the U.S. mainland. And as a result of that, it became a smuggler's paradise. A lot of drugs moved through South Caicos. And that is where we got the name the Big South, because a lot of money, drug money, was in circulation at South Caicos. And people, some people benefited from it. Some people, a lot of young men got hooked on drugs and didn't benefit from it. But that whole stigma of being a drug haven, I think, plagued us for a number of years. As a matter of fact, much of the promotion of the Turks and Caicos Islands didn't promote South Caicos because of that stigma. There are times when you heard of Providenciales and Grand Turk and South Key and Middle and North, but nothing about South Caicos because of that stigma. As a matter of fact, some people negatively spoke about this to potential developers and tourists. Oh, you don't want to go to South Caicos. That's just drugs and drug addicts. And so that whole stigma has kept us out of the mainstream of development in the Turks and Caicos Islands for a while. But I always knew that we had the potential to surge ahead. And now that that is happening, I think that whole stigma is going to fall away of South Caicos being a drug haven and only for drug addicts and drug pushers and that kind of a thing. As a matter of fact, people used to say, can anything good come out of South Caicos? People used to say that. And then I started noticing we had the best pilots coming out of South Caicos, Edison Brooks and
Yes.
Harold Williams, and the
Yes.
best pilots. And then I noticed we started having some academics, and we started having doctors and lawyers, and Norman Saunders Jr. and Charlene Cartwright Roberts, good lawyers coming out of South Caicos, and
Correct.
doctors, Dr. Darren Hall. We had, can anything good come out of South Caicos? Yes, I always say yes. And I start naming the good that has come out of South Caicos. But as I said, that whole stigma is falling away now. And I think South Caicos is going to emerge and become the jewel in the crown of the Turks and Caicos Islands that it's supposed to be.
I agree with that. And you made an excellent point in terms of talking about, just pointing out some of the good things that have come out of South Caicos. A lot of times, like I said before, you don't think about South Caicos and you don't think about these people, but when you began calling names, I'm like, oh yeah, he's from South Caicos. Oh yeah, she's from South Caicos. And it shows you that great products have come out of South Caicos. And I think South Caicos is going to be on the rise. I feel so too. And I think people just need to.
It's already on the rise.
Yep. And I think people just need to get on the bandwagon. But I mean, it's just really good to have this conversation with you today, just to highlight South Caicos.
This is our time. This is our time now. And we're going to make it happen.
That's a good way to put it. Yes, definitely. So again, thank you so much for agreeing to come on the show. It was a pleasure having you here. It was a pleasure just hearing about some of these initiatives that your government is putting forward. And not only that, a pleasure just to hear about some of the, the history of South Caicos and bringing it to the forefront and reminding us about what South Caicos can produce. And definitely, like I said before, knowing that South Caicos had the first hotel, I'll tell you the truth, that was really an eye-opener for me, because I didn't even know that, but definitely you have shared a lot of great information here. And if there's any last words you would like to say, this is your opportunity before we close out.
No, I just want to say thank you for having me. You've made it very easy. You are a good interviewer. You put me at ease, and so I was able to respond in a way that I felt comfortable. So thank you very much for being so accommodating and allowing me to share on your show. I see great things in store for you as far as the show is concerned, and other initiatives I'm sure you're going to be taking on. You're going to do very well into the. So thank you.
Thank you. While you say that, in store for the show, I always like to say to people, when I started this show, I really brought it up just for especially us local people, just to remind them of what we have and for them to, take advantage of it. Someone said to me the other day, oh, you're in real estate and most times you're giving out so much information. I said, it's not about me. It's about us as a people. This is what I'm passionate about, real estate. Right. And I feel like any information that I can put forward to you as my colleagues, as Turks and Caicos Islanders, to get more information about, take it, run with it. And that's why I try to invite people on the show where they can share their ideas and give us the facts about what is happening, so we can make informed decisions on how to move forward and how we can make our country better in the Turks and Caicos Islands. So again,
you're doing a great job at it.
Thank you. And so for those who are listening, again, thank you for listening. And like I always like to say, have a great afternoon, stay safe, and remain blessed. Have a great afternoon. The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed on this show belong solely to Let's Talk TCI Real Estate and not that of Keller Williams TCI or any of its affiliates. Any action you take upon the information provided on this show is strictly at your own risk, and Let's Talk TCI Real Estate guest or host will not be liable for any losses and damages in connection with the use of the material. I am not an investment advisor, broker, or dealer.